Well, good afternoon. This is your host, Michael J. Long, and thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. Well, what can I say? We got a president that just does whatever he wants, when he wants, how he wants. And the conservatives, they love him. That's right. President Donald Trump, with whom the conservatives love. They can't even get enough of him. And that is because every time you turn around, it's always the liberals' fault. Has anyone ever noticed that? The conservatives refuse to accept the responsibility for some of the stuff they do. Let me give you an example. When President Trump was first inaugurated, he allowed what was called the Bikers for Trump to be part of his inaugural convention security personnel. And basically, you have a good portion of people on the left that went out at the time and throw rocks and all this other stuff on public-private property buildings and stuff like that. And so, really, they would turn around, the Bikers for Trump, and basically punch them in the face, throw them on the ground, beat them up, which in the world of law enforcement they would refer to as abuse of powers and excessive force. It's obvious that those people were not trained under any circumstances whatsoever to be part of that security detail. And yet, President Donald Trump allowed them to volunteer their time to be security guards for the day, and they weren't even trained. They were just these clown bikers that went around beating the bahoonies out of people they didn't agree with and sought to beat them up every opportunity they got. So we can go all day, every day, about how the liberals are the aggressive people, how they always attack everyone, and it's true. There are a lot of people on the left that are liberal, that will do things like that. But the conservatives do it too. Okay? It's like they go after the left for saying things like, oh, that's politically correct. Well, guess what? They can't even call torture torture. You know what they refer to torture as? It's an enhanced interrogation technique. That's what they call it. That's their use of language for allowing torture when it's a Republican that's in office, when it's the so-called terrorists or enemies of the United States that we're dealing with. And I guess it's okay to torture them, but never mind the Geneva Convention, that doesn't apply to that. And in the books, if we're going to, that's how they deal with it. They just, we call it an enhanced interrogation technique. Well, first of all, you're not going to get much information out of it. What's going to happen is, let's say you have a suspicion that someone's bombed or attacked certain places, and you want to get information out of that person, so you torture them. So, of course, they're going to admit to it, even if they didn't even do it, because they'll admit to anything to end the torture. So, if that is the case, then what we call enhanced interrogation techniques, which is really actually torture, is ineffective, completely ineffective at, providing security or providing necessary information. And you know, those people aren't stupid, because they're going to turn around and they're going to basically, all these rules that in the Patriot Act and the NDAA that says we're going to spy on you and look at your cell phone records and all this stuff. Well, the actual terrorists, what are they going to do? They're going to use exposable phones that they can throw away and get new ones. So that and every time they do that, it's extremely hard to track them. Plus, they're going to, because they're not going to get all this advanced security and encrypt their phones and all that. They're basically going to throw it away and get a new phone. Every single time they make a phone call or send out a text. And they're going to change their numbers. And they're going to do all this stuff. And what do? We spy on everybody's cell phones and everybody's cell phone numbers, and we expect in the government that the numbers are monitored by government agencies, and that the companies hand over that information. And when it's a company that refuses to cooperate with the government, they basically try to penalize them and force them to comply. Well, who are you, that being the government, to force the free market to comply with any standard? Usually, they're pretty good with when you have a warrant and you're investigating someone, they usually do hand over that information. But they're not going to just hand over their company secrets, even with or without a warrant, just to sit there and give it to the government, because then the government can crack the code to unlock the cell phones and use that as a means to spy on others without a warrant. See, there are some bad people in this world. There's no doubt about it. But I do not want to have a system that has no due process of law. So, for example, if someone is going to impose danger, force, or fraud to others, whether it's a terroristical act, whether it's a terrorist act that they plan on doing, whether it's a mass shooting, a bombing, an armed robbery, an unarmed robbery, assault, rape, whatever it is, whatever it happens to be, or whatever type of danger, force, or fraud that they plan to commit, or whatever type of terrorist acts that they can plan to commit. Okay, someone's going to do that. Okay, so you get a warrant. You get a warrant from the courts if you have probable cause that someone's about to do that. And with that warrant, you go in, you talk to the company, go into that person's cell phone, see what they're going to do, relay that to local, state, county police, find where their address is. You know, it's not that hard. You don't have to spy on billions and billions and billions of people just to do that. And so my point is, on top of the fact that the NDAA and the Patriot Act are unconstitutional and therefore illegal in the United States to have, right? It's also ineffective. There's other ways to deal with it. And so, basically, I want a system where there's due process of law, where the person that plans on committing the assault, or whatever he or she plans to do, is held accountable. He or she is then arrested, he or she then goes to court and has to testify with a defense attorney, and then you have the DA to prosecute that person and just present the evidence. You present all this to a jury in a jury trial, and if they're found guilty, they get whatever the penalty is. Okay? That could mean 30, 40 years in prison, or, whatever. So, there's no reason on the face of the earth to have to actually bypass due process and spy on everyone and then turn around and take their private property, even if they are guilty of whatever type of imposed criminal force or fraud. Now, let's say the bank takes you've bought a house and you haven't paid off the bank, and you missed a payment or two, and they're allowed, because it's still their house, to repossess it, right? But that's different than when the government takes it because you committed a violent crime or because you didn't pay the taxes, and they just come and take your property and take everything that you own, everything that you purchased, which we call asset forfeiture, which is also illegal under the U.S. Constitution. And, there's also various different federal laws that don't allow for that. But with the NDAA and the Patriot Act aside, what you have is a president that can do no wrong in the eyes of the conservatives. He's basically what Obama was to the left, which is the conservative version of the second coming of Christ, because that's basically how the liberals treated Obama. That's how conservatives are treating Trump. He can do no wrong. He is the Messiah. And therefore, because we're conservatives, we're going to worship him. That's their viewpoint. That's why whenever President Trump says, okay, we're going to build a wall, we're going to do this North Dakota pipeline, we're also going to violate people's civil liberties and rights and freedoms, and place tariffs on Cuba, North Korea, China, Venezuela, start wars, bomb Iran, keep troops in Iraq, the whole 9 yards. And Congress doesn't hold him accountable for it. Yet, he makes a call to the Ukraine and basically says to one of their personnel, look, if I get reelected, I will give you foreign aid. Because if I don't get reelected, you won't get foreign aid. That's what he tells them. That's what this impeachment inquiry is about. But they never considered impeaching him on signing executive orders from left to right to legislate from where he's at a position, when it's Congress's job to make laws, not the president's. So, he's abusing his authority from left to right. Whatever he says, that's what the military does. There's no accountability. There was never any accountability when Obama was in office, never any accountability when Bush was in office, and never any accountability when Clinton and Reagan, all these other people were in office. So, if Trump gets a slap on the back from Congress, of course he's going to do whatever he wants, especially when you got Republicans willing to embrace him every step of the way. But let's suppose he gets impeached now, which means that they bring charges up against him. Then he still that doesn't mean that he gets kicked out of office. What that means is that then he has to go to the Senate. And then the Senate decides after he testifies whether they're going to kick him out or not, based on the evidence during the impeachment inquiry, if he's successfully impeached. In other words, if he's successfully impeached, he stays in office, but he still has to go to Senate. The Senate, if the Senate decides he can no longer be president, I'm all for it, right? And basically it's going to require at least 6 of the Republicans to support most of the so-called Democrats and whatever independent legislators you have in the Senate. Because basically you need a 2/3 and a 1/3 majority for that. for just to kick him out. So anyways, I'm Michael J. Long, and thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.